Be a setback to the multi-million-dollar program to eradicate pests plaguing Macquarie Island.
Aerial baiting for rabbits is about to begin on Macquarie Island.
Now, the African penguin's on course to become extinct in the wild.
What happens when thousands of starving rats invade an island filled with defenseless penguins? This true-life nightmare spiraled far beyond anyone's expectations, leading to a tragic and unforeseen outcome. Isolated from help, the island became a battleground for survival. In this chilling story of nature gone wrong, nothing could prepare rescuers for what they eventually discovered.
It was a $24 million project in the middle of the Southern Ocean. The aim to rid World Heritage-listed Macquarie Island of rabbits and rodents.
Join us as we uncover the harrowing truth behind one of the most disturbing wildlife disasters ever recorded. You won't believe how it all ends. Pest eradication. Years ago, Macquarie Island, located in the sub-Antarctic region, was severely damaged by an overpopulation of rabbits, rats, and mice, putting its wildlife at risk of extinction. Rodents were eating invertebrates and eggs, while the erosion caused by rabbits was leading to landslides that, in one case, resulted in the deaths of hundreds of king penguins at Lusitania Bay. Recognizing the gravity of this issue, the Tasmanian and federal governments initiated a bold 3-year campaign in 2007, investing $25 million to eliminate all 3 pest species simultaneously. This effort involved a focused approach that included aerial baiting, the introduction of the calicivirus, and the use of dogs to ensure the complete removal of the last remaining rabbits and rodents. Handlers and their dogs thoroughly searched the island twice, covering over 90,000 kilometers, and by 2014, no rats, mice, or rabbits had been spotted for the necessary 2-year period, leading to the island being declared pest-free. Andrea Turbet, the executive officer of Macquarie Island, has dedicated many years to working there as the ranger in charge. She played a key role in the planning of the Macquarie Island pest eradication program. She remarked that it was a very ambitious project. She also mentioned that they faced numerous challenges, addressing 3 different invasive species all at once on such a remote and difficult island during the winter. At that time, it was a groundbreaking international achievement, and it's something they should all take pride in, she remarked. Baiting and the use of dogs were essential in eliminating the rabbits, mice, and rats from the island. Dr. Alex Tarods, who leads a program at the Australian Antarctic Division, along with Dr. Chris Carlyon, a wildlife biologist from Tasmania's Department of Natural Resources and Environment, dedicated many years to studying the island before the campaign and recently returned on the annual resupply trip. They embarked on a 10-day round hike from the northern station to Herd Point in the far south, returning thrilled by the changes they observed. Dr. Carlton stated that they had an amazing view of the albatross slopes in the southwest corner, and the recovery of the vegetation is truly remarkable. The albatross used to nest on very exposed slopes when rabbits were present. Now, the solid tussock growth is stabilizing the slopes, which means erosion is no longer a major issue for those species. Dr. Tarods, who spent years living in remote field huts on the island while researching the wildlife, is just as impressed. He stated that it was amazing to return and see the slopes that were once completely stripped of vegetation by rabbits, now looking vibrant with plenty of tussock and giant herbs. He also mentioned that some of them on the trip have been involved in the wildlife monitoring program for many years, and what they were witnessing at the moment, 15 years later, is a significant improvement in the island's vegetation, which has important positive effects for the breeding of seabirds. From a plant perspective, the island is doing really well. Grasses and large green plants are thriving on a hillside above a black sand beach. Tussock grasses and giant herbs are thriving after the rabbits were removed. One result of the baiting program was the loss of some scavenging seabirds, like giant petrels and skuas that fed on the dead rodents. Measures were taken to lessen that effect. including the removal and burial of carcasses. But Dr. Carlion mentions that the cost of doing nothing would have been much higher. He also mentioned that they always anticipated this would happen. It tends to occur in places where aerial baiting is conducted. It was a cost they were willing to accept to reach the desired outcome. But those species are recovering, returning to their previous numbers. Biosecurity threats are their top concern. Focus has now shifted to tracking the recovery of Macquarie Island's wildlife and ensuring it stays free of pests. Thorough biosecurity measures are in place to keep rodents, insects, and weeds out. Curly, the rodent detection dog, checks cargo before it's loaded onto RSV Nuyina in Hobart, and she does it again on Macquarie Island to ensure nothing slips through. Biosecurity threats are the biggest concern across the entire island, so we need to be extremely vigilant, Ms. Turbet remarked. The primary issue is the potential return of rodents, but insects are also crucial because they can have significant effects on the ecosystem, just like weeds. If any of those species were to establish themselves, it would be nearly impossible to get rid of them, so it's far more cost-effective and efficient to prevent them from getting established in the first place. Wildlife monitoring is being conducted regularly to pinpoint the species that might be facing difficulties. Gen 2 penguin populations, for instance, are on the decline, and the reasons remain unclear. Improvements in vegetation are being observed, but there are many potential changes on the island, such as climate shifts and the threat of high pathogenicity avian influenza, Dr. Tarods mentioned. If there was no monitoring, they wouldn't know the current status and trends, and more importantly, what actions needed to be taken. The focus will be on which species require monitoring and distribute resources accordingly over the next 5 to 10 years to understand what's going on with these key species. The Macquarie Island Pest Eradication Project was overseen by Tasmania Parks and Wildlife Service with assistance from the Australian Antarctic Division. It received co-funding from both the Tasmanian and Australian governments. Getting rid of the rats was just the beginning. The real challenge lies in protecting one of nature's most vulnerable birds. The danger isn't over because penguins face threats far beyond just invasive pests. Let's find out why they are so vulnerable. Penguins' vulnerability. The Punta Medanos, a colony of Magellanic penguins located on Argentina's coast, has almost 8,000 breeding pairs. Other colonies have populations in the hundreds of thousands. In 2007, just 3 years after Monteleon National Park was established along the rugged coastline of Argentine Patagonia, the efforts to safeguard penguins took an unexpected twist. A female puma was unaliving Magellanic penguins in large numbers. Some of the penguins were consumed, while others were left to decay. Soon, her cubs began to join in on the hunt. In total, this family likely took the lives of thousands of penguins over several nesting seasons. Conservationists were taken aback. Surely, such attacks were not common in the past. The park was established, at least partly, to protect the significant penguin colony, which consists of tens of thousands of birds. The penguins even play a major role in the park's logo. Wildlife managers intervened to stop the killings. Javier Ciancio, a marine biologist and ecologist from Argentina's National Scientific and Technical Research Council, stated that they ultimately chose to sacrifice these animals to safeguard penguins. But new findings released in December 2024 in the Journal for Nature Conservation by Ciancio and his team indicate that this type of predation likely happened in the past, and it could explain why there were once fewer penguin colonies on the mainland of South America. This situation probably changed about 100 years ago, when an influx of sheep farmers led to the elimination of most land-based predators, and the rise of whaling and the fur trade may have drastically decreased marine predators. The long-term ecological effects of these human actions may have created the conditions for a surge in mainland penguin populations. An adult female puma and her young killed thousands of penguins in just a few seasons in Monteleon National Park. In their research, Ciancio and his colleagues looked into how significant penguins were in the diet of the 4 pumas that ravaged the colony at Monteleon. They also investigated the history of this penguin species. As Ciancio and his team point out in their paper, most seabirds, including Magellanic penguins, typically breed in colonies located on small offshore islands or sometimes on steep cliffs on the mainland. These types of nesting sites are mostly safe from land predators, which could easily destroy nests, chicks, and even adult birds, especially since penguins are not very graceful on land. The Magellanic penguins make their nests on islands off the coast of South America, as well as on more distant islands like the Falklands. However, over the last century, they have increasingly started nesting in large groups on the mainland of South America. Their nesting colonies can be enormous, often numbering in the hundreds of thousands, and are usually found on relatively flat beaches. Most of the Magellanic penguin nesting colonies on the mainland of South America are quite recent, particularly the very large ones like those at Punta Tombo and Peninsula Valdez in Argentina. Although there is some evidence that penguins were present at Punta Tombo during the Miocene epoch millions of years ago, it seems that the colony vanished until at least 1876, as bird surveys from that time did not mention any of these aquatic birds. Dee Boersma, a biologist from the University of Washington, along with her colleagues, suggests that penguins likely settled in Punta Tombo during the 1920s. The population stayed small until the mid-1940s, when it started to grow rapidly. At the same time, other nearby colonies probably began to form in the last century as well, including the huge one at Peninsula Valdez. Boersma and her team have been researching the Punta Tombo colony for many years. In a study released in 1990 in the book Penguin Biology, she and her colleagues observed that the breeding distribution seems to be shifting northward as conditions for the species have improved. Colonies near Puerto Madryn, like the one at Peninsula Valdez and Punta Tombo, now have populations in the hundreds of thousands. Ciancio mentions that the penguins at Monteleon might have flourished for the century before recent decades due to the absence of pumas in the region. Some of the earliest settlers in coastal Argentine Patagonia were sheep farmers. To better safeguard their livestock, they eliminated all possible predators in the area, including pumas, foxes, and smaller native wildcats. To get rid of mountain lions from their farms, settlers employed a mix of poison, which would have killed not just pumas, but also other smaller potential threats, and limoneros specialists skilled in hunting and killing pumas. Ciancio stated that they've become very effective in eradicating pumas. By getting rid of predators that could have preyed on penguin nests, chicks, or even adult penguins, the farmers essentially created more suitable nesting habitats for penguins along the coast. This allowed penguins to either increase in population or range, or to move their nesting sites from offshore islands to mainland beaches that might be closer to abundant forage fish resources. Ciancio states that the farmer who poisoned to eliminate pumas never imagined he'd impact the larger marine ecosystem. The Patagonian coast in Argentina lacks many offshore islands, which are safe nesting spots for penguins away from predators. Allowing them to breed on the mainland has created new habitats. The issue is that, for the penguins, the dry conditions of coastal Patagonia in Argentina aren't ideal for sheep farming over time. Sheep and other farming practices quickly ruin the soil, and the strong winds in the region blow away much of what remains. By the 1990s, many shepherds had abandoned the area because of this. The government took steps to protect some penguin colonies by establishing national parks like Monteleon. However, this might have backfired, at least for the penguin populations. The absence of sheep farmers and the new protections from national parks meant that pumas, foxes, and other predators were no longer eliminated. In some instances, they have returned to coastal regions, where they hunt penguins. Based on stable isotope analysis done by Ciancio and his team on the 4 pumas at Monteleon, their diet shifted from primarily terrestrial food to one that almost completely relied on penguins. Additionally, Ciancio points out that pumas, like other felines, often kill far more prey than they can consume. A puma can take down hundreds of penguins while only eating a small portion of them, he explains. Ciancio mentions that pumas might have a long-term impact on penguins. He states, predation is especially significant when the colony is just starting to form. He adds that this could occur at any moment on the continent, but after predation incidents, penguins might opt to nest in different, safer areas like islands. Magellanic penguins establish their nesting colonies on the South American mainland. Katie Holt, a biology graduate student at the University of Washington who collaborates with Boersma at Punta Tombo, but was not part of Ciancio's research, supports Ciancio's conclusion that the removal of pumas and other large predators by farmers likely enabled penguins to nest. Eliminating predators has now permitted this very charming seabird to settle in, she explained. However, she believes that pumas won't significantly affect penguin colonies, even if they come in and unalive around 100 at once, because of the sheer size of these colonies, which can reach hundreds of thousands. She also mentions that other factors probably assisted the penguins in establishing a presence on the mainland around a century ago. For instance, Boersma pointed out in her 1990 research several possible reasons for the expanding range of penguins in mainland South America, such as a reduction in competition for forage fish following the significant decline of whales in the early 20th century. Seals and sea lions, both predators of penguins and competitors for food, were also extensively hunted in the mid-1900s. Indigenous communities used to catch penguins, but they have largely disappeared from much of the coastline due to colonial oppression. Additionally, climate change over the last 100 years may have altered the availability of penguin prey, resulting in more food being accessible for penguins in certain regions than before. Ciancio's study wasn't just about the past. His team examined how penguins might influence the anchovy population along the coast. By utilizing current penguin population figures to estimate their forage fish consumption, the team discovered that in the regions where penguins feed, they likely consume more than what the fishing fleet catches. Ciancio states that today's consumption exceeds the total fisheries output. This creates a conservation dilemma, according to Ciancio, where wildlife managers might have to face hard choices. What should be done when human actions, like getting rid of land predators, help popular species like penguins, but harm less popular natural resources, such as forage fish and the marine food webs connected to them? He and his co-authors mentioned in their paper. Even though penguins might be consuming a lot, Holt is uncertain if the overall impact on forage fish is any different from centuries ago, when marine mammals like whales, seals, or sea lions probably took a bigger share. She explained that before there were so many penguins nesting along the coast, there were likely many other top predators feeding on forage fish. However, tough questions come up about how wildlife managers should handle the situation along the coast. For instance, should park managers bring in or allow pumas into coastal national parks to lessen the effect of penguins on fish stocks? Or should pumas be removed to protect the populations of these charismatic birds? As Ciancio and his team question in the paper, which species have the most ecological importance in these ecosystems? To truly understand why penguins are struggling, we need to take a closer look at the penguins themselves. Let's find out what makes these birds so extraordinary. Penguins. Penguins are a type of aquatic birds that can't fly, belonging to the family Sphenicidae and the order Spheniciformes. They mainly live in the southern hemisphere. The only exception is the Galapagos penguin, which can be found near the equator, with some of its population just a little north of it, within a quarter degree of latitude. Penguins are really well suited for ocean life, sporting dark and white feathers and flippers that help them swim. They usually eat krill, fish, squid, and other sea creatures, catching them with their beaks and swallowing them whole while they swim. Penguins have a spiky tongue and strong jaws to hold on to their slippery food. They spend about half of their lives on land and the other half in the water. The emperor penguin, Aptenodytes forsteri, is the largest species, with adults averaging around 1.1 meter tall and weighing about 35 kilograms. On the other hand, the smallest species is the little blue penguin, Eudiptula minor, also called the fairy penguin, which is about 30 to 33 centimeters tall and weighs between 1.2 and 1.3 kilograms. Nowadays, larger penguins typically live in colder areas, while smaller ones are found in temperate or tropical climates. Some ancient penguin species were huge, as tall or heavy as an adult human. There used to be a wide variety of species in subantarctic regions, and at least one giant species existed around 2,000 kilometers south of the equator 35 million years ago, during the late Eocene, when the climate was much warmer than it is nowadays. The term penguin was first recorded in literature at the close of the 16th century, where it was used as a synonym for the great auk. When European explorers came across what we now call penguins in the southern hemisphere, they noticed how similar they looked to the great auk from the northern hemisphere and decided to name them after this bird, even though they aren't closely related. The origin of the word penguin is still a topic of discussion. The English term doesn't seem to come from French, Breton, or Spanish. The latter two are linked to the French word pingouin, but it first shows up in English or Dutch. Adult male penguins are sometimes referred to as cocks, while females are often called hens. When they are on land, a group of penguins is known as a waddle, and when they are in the water, it's called a raft. Since 1871, the Latin term pinguinus has been used in scientific classification to identify the genus of the great auk, Pinguinus impennis, which means plump or fat without flight feathers. This species went extinct in the mid-19th century. A genetic study conducted in 2004 confirmed that the genus Pinguinus is part of the family of auks, Alcidae, and falls under the order Charadriformes. The penguins we know today were discovered later on, and sailors named them due to their physical similarity to the great auk. However, despite this similarity, penguins are not auks and are not closely related to the great auk. They do not belong to the genus Pinguinus and are not classified in the same family or order as the great auk. In 1831, Charles-Lucien Bonaparte classified them into several distinct genera within the family Sphenicidae and the order Sphenisciformes. The geographical and time-related pattern of Sphenicene evolution closely matches two global cooling events noted in the paleoclimatic record. The subantarctic lineage appeared at the end of the Bartonian, which aligns with the beginning of a slow cooling phase that eventually resulted in the ice ages about 35 million years later. As the habitat on the Antarctic coasts diminished by the Priabonian, the subantarctic regions offered more suitable conditions for most penguins compared to Antarctica itself. Later on, a brief warming period was interrupted by the Middle Miocene climate transition, which saw a significant drop in global average temperatures from 14 to 12 million years ago, followed by similar abrupt cooling events at 8 million years ago and 4 million years ago. By the end of the Tortonian, the Antarctic ice sheet had already reached a volume and extent similar to what we see today. The rise of most of the current subantarctic penguin species was almost certainly driven by this series of climate changes during the Neogene. The ancestry of penguins beyond Waimanu is still a mystery and hasn't been clearly defined through molecular or morphological studies. These studies often get complicated due to the strong unique traits of the Spheniciformes. The sometimes thought to be close connection between penguins and grebes is likely a mistake, as both groups have developed strong diving abilities that are similar but not due to shared ancestry. Additionally, various DNA sequence datasets do not consistently align with one another. What is evident is that penguins are part of a group known as Neoeves, which includes all modern birds except for paleognaths and fowl, that is sometimes referred to as higher water birds, to set them apart from older waterfowl. This category includes birds like storks, rails, and seabirds, with the possible exception of the Charadriformes. Within this category, the relationships among penguins are much less defined. Depending on the research and data used, some have proposed a close link to Cichoniiformes or to Procellariiformes. There are also those who believe that the penguin-like Plotopterids, often seen as relatives of cormorants and anhingas, might actually be a sister group to penguins, suggesting that these penguins could have shared a common ancestor with the pelecaniform semes, which would mean they should be included in that order. Alternatively, it could be that Plotopterids are not as closely related to other pelecaniforms as previously thought, which would require dividing the traditional pelecaniforms into 3 separate groups. A 2014 study that looked at the whole genomes of 48 different bird species found that penguins are closely related to Procellariiformes, from which they split off around 60 million years ago. Puffins, which are not closely related and live in the North Pacific and North Atlantic, have developed similar traits to adapt to the Arctic and subarctic climates. Like penguins, puffins have a white chest, a black back, and short, stubby wings that help them swim well in icy waters. However, unlike penguins, puffins can fly, since flightless birds wouldn't be able to survive with land predators like polar bears and foxes around. There are no such predators in Antarctica. Their similarities show that similar environments, even if they are far apart, can lead to similar evolutionary changes, which is known as convergent evolution. Penguins are incredibly suited for life in the water. Their wings have changed into flippers, which are not useful for flying in the air. But in the water, penguins are surprisingly quick and nimble. Their swimming resembles how birds fly in the sky. Within their sleek feathers, there is a layer of air that helps them float. This air layer also keeps them warm in chilly waters. On land, penguins balance themselves using their tails and wings to stand upright. All penguins have a counter-shaded appearance for hiding, meaning they have black backs and wings with white fronts. A predator looking up from below, like an orca or a leopard seal, finds it hard to tell the difference between a white penguin belly and the shiny water surface. The dark feathers on their backs help them blend in from above. Gen 2 penguins are the fastest swimming birds in the ocean. They can swim as fast as 36 kilometers, about 22 miles, per hour, while hunting for food or escaping from threats. They can also dive to depths of 170 to 200 meters, about 560 to 660 feet. Smaller penguins usually don't dive very deep. They catch their food near the surface in dives that last just 1 or 2 minutes. Bigger penguins can dive deeper if necessary. Emperor penguins are the deepest diving birds in the world, capable of reaching depths of around 550 meters, 1,800 feet, while looking for food. Penguins are often seen as cute because of their unique upright waddling walk, their swimming skills, and their unusual lack of fear towards humans compared to other birds. Their black and white feathers are frequently compared to a tuxedo. Some authors and artists have depicted penguins living at the North Pole, but in reality, there are no wild penguins in the Arctic. The animated series Chilly Willy contributed to this misconception, as the main penguin character interacted with Arctic animals like polar bears and walruses. Penguins have inspired numerous books and movies, including CGI films like Happy Feet, Surf's Up, and Penguins of Madagascar. The documentary March of the Penguins, which focuses on the emperor penguin's migration, and the parody farce of the penguins. Mr. Popper's Penguins, a children's book by Richard and Florence Atwater, was recognized as a Newbery Honor Book in 1939. Penguins have also been featured in various cartoons and TV shows, such as Pingu, which was co-created by Ottmar Gutmann and Erika Brueggemann in 1990, and has over 100 short episodes. At the end of 2009, Entertainment Weekly included it in its best of list for the decade, stating, "Whether they were walking, March of the Penguins, dancing, Happy Feet, or surfing, Surf's Up, these strangely charming birds soared at the box office throughout the decade." A video game named Pengo was launched by Sega in 1982. It takes place in Antarctica, where players control a penguin character that has to find its way through ice cube mazes. Players are treated to cutscenes featuring animated penguins that march, dance, salute, and play peekaboo. There have been several remakes and upgraded versions since then, with the latest one coming out in 2012. Penguins are also sometimes featured in music. In 1941, DC Comics introduced the bird-themed character known as the Penguin, who serves as a supervillain foe to the superhero Batman. He has become one of Batman's most lasting enemies. In the 1960s Batman TV series, portrayed by Burgess Meredith, he was a fan-favorite character, and in Tim Burton's reimagining, the character played by Danny DeVito in the 1992 film Batman Returns commanded a real army of penguins, mainly African and king penguins. Numerous professional, minor, college, and high school sports teams across the United States have adopted names inspired by this species, including the Pittsburgh Penguins in the National Hockey League and the Youngstown State Penguins in college sports. Penguins were often seen in the cartoons by UK cartoonist Steve Bell, especially in his strip for The Guardian newspaper during and after the Falklands War. Opus the Penguin, from Berkeley Breathed's cartoons, is also said to come from the Falklands. He was a funny, existentialist penguin character in the comics Bloom County, Outland, and Opus. Additionally, he starred in the animated Christmas special, A Wish for Wings That Work. In the mid-2000s, penguins became one of the most talked-about animal species, known for forming long-lasting homosexual partnerships. A children's book titled And Tango Makes Three was created about one such penguin family at the New York Zoo. If you enjoyed this video, like and subscribe, and also click the next video shown on your screen.